You are now listening to Radio Merdog.
It's December 15th, 1967. It's a cold and quiet evening in a quaint little town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia. That is, until the Silver Bridge collapses into the freezing, icy Ohio River, taking the lives of 46 innocent people. Eyewitnesses claim to have seen something strange in the sky, a shape unlike that of anything else they have seen before, with big red eyes, huge wings, in the body of a man. Who or what could it be? Is it the Mothman? Welcome back to Radio Merdog, and by the way, if you're listening to this alone in the dark, maybe turn on a light, because it's about to get spooky. My name is Merdog, and you already know how things roll around here. I talk about cryptids, conspiracies, and all sorts of fringe topics. And today I'm going to be wading a little bit deeper into some cryptid action once again. And this is truly something that holds a dear place in my heart. I'm just really stoked and overall fired up to talk about this fella. And there's a lot of cool stuff going on with it, and I think you'll like it. But first, really quick, I want to make sure that you're up to speed on what a cryptid is. And it's basically just an animal that hasn't been fully proven or accepted by the greater scientific community yet. And the word cryptid comes from the Greek word kryptos, which means hidden. And cryptozoology refers to the study of cryptids in a zoological manner, so seeing them as animals, which, colloquially means hidden animals. So there's really a ton of cryptids out there, many of which have been proven to be true and are accepted by the community, like the mountain gorilla, okapi, and the giant squid. But now that that's taken care of, let's dive a little deeper into the Mothman and try to figure out what's really up with him. So, what is the Mothman? I mean, it's a pretty ridiculous sounding name, and that may be partly why it's one of our country's most iconic cryptids. Everything surrounding the legend of the Mothman is really quite nightmarish, and there are a lot of levels to the story, and some people have come up with some pretty outlandish theories, and I think it's pretty cool to look at them with an open mind and really just have an open mind and heart with this. It's an older cryptid. It's not like from the 1800s, but the first sighting happened on November 15th, 1966. There were two young couples out on a drive, Roger and Linda Scarberry, and Steve and Mary Millette, and they were driving by the spot called the TNT area in West Virginia. And the TNT area was basically just an old World War II munition site, and mind you, this was only 21 years after we nuked Japan and the war ended, pretty much, so it was still relatively recent, but at this point was an old abandoned munition site. And these two couples reportedly saw a 7-foot-tall creature with glowing red eyes and a 10 to 15-foot wingspan that chased their cars and kept up with them when they were driving over 100 miles an hour to try to escape this thing. And it also made a loud screeching sound, supposedly. So they were just like basically a horror movie intro scene, and I can't even imagine how terrifying that must have been. That is just a brutal scenario. Then over the following days, more and more people started to report similar sightings, and coincidentally it was after the local newspapers covered it that the sightings kind of blew up, but that's kind of the way she goes. There was a lot of different theories right off the bat. There were two volunteer firemen, for example, who claimed that they saw a large bird with red eyes. There was a sheriff who believed that the sightings were due to an exceptionally large heron. There was a local contractor who claimed that he saw the creature aimed a flashlight at it, and its eyes glowed bright red, and they kind of looked like bicycle reflectors. He also then went on to blame the disappearance of his German Shepherd on this creature, claiming it took it away in the night, along with some strange buzzing sounds coming from his TV. Thought that was strange, that he thought this large humanoid flying winged beasts was making his TV buzz a little bit, but, whatever. So these sightings continued on over the following year, over pretty much 13 months, and they all came to a head on December 15th, 1967, when this massive suspension bridge, known as the Silver Bridge, collapsed into the Ohio River. And this was a horrible tragedy. I mean, it resulted in the deaths of 46 people, 2 of whom their bodies were never recovered. And supposedly, the Mothman was seen at the site of the collapse and then was never seen again, at least in the capacity of how he was initially seen, being a tall winged humanoid with glowing red eyes from Point Pleasant, West Virginia. There were some other sightings later on, but I'll get into that later. So, him being at the site of the collapse has led to this whole bout of speculation regarding people thinking that the Mothman may have been responsible for the bridge collapsing. Some people think he was a sort of protector for those that survived, and, and that things could have been much worse if he had not been there, as almost like a guardian angel for us. And I do think it's pretty interesting looking at the biblical comparisons of the Mothman to angels in the Bible and the way it's described as flying and maneuvering around, and then its role in the Silver Bridge. Maybe Mothman's an angel. I couldn't tell you. So, 8 years after the bridge collapsed, this book came out by this guy named John Keel called The Mothman Prophecies. And then they also did make a movie about it in 2002, which I highly recommend you watch the movie and read the book if you're interested in learning more about the Mothman, because he does a fantastic job at going in depth into the legend and all the myths surrounding it. So in the book, John Keel went and personally interviewed dozens of people in the town of Point Pleasant, where all of this was going on over those 13 months, to get their personal anecdotal experience. And in his book, he claimed that the residents of Point Pleasant were experiencing precognitions over this time frame, these 13 months, including premonitions of the collapse of the Silver Bridge. He heard that from multiple people. There were several UFO sightings in the area during this time frame, which weren't the norm before that. People were claiming visits from inhuman or threatening men in black, which is definitely a topic I'll be going over at some point in the near future, because I think it's kind of an interesting psyop how Men in Black is now fully associated with the movie series, which, believe me, I love those movies. They're awesome. But it has been a very well-documented phenomena for many, many years before the release of the films, of people being visited by these Men in Black. And yeah, David Icke talks a lot about it in his books, and I'll be going over a lot of David Icke's work in the show. He's got a lot of really cool stuff to say about it all. But point being, people in Point Pleasant were saying they had visits from the Men in Black, and just other general phenomena often associated with paranormal events were going on. So he concluded, that being John Keel, that there's a pretty strong correlation between the arrival of the Mothman and that initial sighting at the TNT area and all of these purported psychic phenomena. So, in chapter 6 of his book, of the Mothman Prophecies, he kind of combined all of the main sightings of the Mothman and gave the most accurate description that we have to date. And his description was that of a 6.5 to 7 foot tall, gray, featherless creature with bright glowing red eyes, and he emphasized that the glowing, it was like an internal flame, like it was just so bright and came from the inside, which I thought was pretty fascinating. And that it made a squeaking sound, and he likened it to the sound of a sped up phonograph record or like a huge mouse. He claimed that it had legs which strongly resemble that of a muscular man, not like that of a bird, with long, skinny legs. These were thick, muscly legs. And then this is where it gets really interesting, is that the wings of this beast, they would fold up into and unfold from the back, much like a moth, and that's where, the Mothman name came from, instead of the wings being positioned at its side, which is how all of our birds, that's how they all are. Owls, cranes, etc. are all folded together on the side. In one of the initial reports from the Point Pleasant Register, that came out just a day or two after the initial sighting, the witness report describes the wings as positioned in a way resembling a classical biblical angel, capable of rising vertically, that being, the beast was able to rise vertically without flapping its wings, so it's like a VTOL warship just going up. It's pretty wild. Then at one point in Chapter 8 of the Mothman Prophecies, its body plan in flight is compared to that of a hang glider. So imagine it just being parallel to the ground, just kind of cruising, but still zooming. I mean, the initial report, they were going over 100 miles per hour, and he was keeping up with them and chased them to the edge of the city limits of Point Pleasant. So that's just terrifying. It's also worth noting that it's a 10-foot wingspan, which was pretty consistently described by all eyewitnesses, would not be capable of supporting a bird that size, meaning 6.5 to 7 feet tall, particularly in the way its takeoff behavior was reported. I mean, there's really no bird out there. I mean, they need to flap their wings to get the lift. They don't just shoot straight up like this was described as. So could potentially lend credence to some hoax theories. If theoretically they were to tie helium balloons to something, maybe strap some glowing red flashlights on it. I don't know. I've seen some people who tried to debunk it by claiming stuff like that. I haven't really seen evidence supporting it, but it's just something to think about. So, when looking at all this, what could Mothman really be? Could it be an interdimensional entity? Could it be an angel? A supernatural omen? A government experiment? A bird? A plane? Let's look at the facts. So really ignoring all of the psychic phenomena and everything related to the bridge collapse, which is where things can kind of get a little wonky, the sightings were consistently of a tall, 6 to 7 foot tall, man-like humanoid creature with big, strong legs, a 10-plus foot wingspan, and really brightly glowing red eyes as well, of course. There are a lot of things that fit that description, so I'm just going to go over them one by one, kind of in order of least crazy to maybe most crazy. Let's do that. So, probably the most boring and basic theory, and I've seen this all over, is that the Mothman was simply just a misidentified sandhill crane. And I implore you to look up a sandhill crane. For one, they don't generally go through West Virginia. They do occasionally on certain migratory patterns, but they spend a lot of their time in the southern United States. Like, I've seen them all over Florida. They're beautiful animals, but they're usually 5 to 6 feet tall, so they're pretty tall birds. They have large red rings around their eyes, which is where a lot of people point to it, given the consistency of the red eye reporting for the Mothman. And they also generally have a 6 to 7 foot wingspan, so not the 10 foot, but still a pretty big wingspan, and it is pretty difficult to get an accurate measurement of really anything you see out in the wild. I mean, God, if you go out in the woods and you see a deer, good luck trying to get an accurate measurement of its size from a distance with no tools. Like, you can guess, but it's a tough thing to do. People think they'll, be able to go out and get an accurate idea of what's out there, but it's way harder than you might initially think. Think of all the sightings for Bigfoot, for example, and the kind of different reports people come up with for that. It doesn't surprise me that they are so inconsistent, but also largely the same. And the odds of getting a good, clear picture of something like that out there, say your goal is to go out there to take a picture of Bigfoot. All right. Say you think there's realistically maybe 10, 20,000 Sasquatch in the US, maybe you're in the Pacific Northwest, you're in Washington, you're going out there deep. Say there's 1,000, 5,000 in the region, whatever, doesn't matter. The odds of you seeing one, for one, are slim. They're super slim. I mean, when you're dealing with another primate who most likely rivals our intelligence or greatly exceeds our intelligence, especially at an emotional level. I mean, they very clearly care for their young and bury their dead. I mean, even elephants do that. But definitely Sasquatch. But think of the odds of you seeing one and then in the moment, the split, you probably have, if you see one, you're seeing it for half a second, a couple seconds maybe. You being able to get out your camera, your phone, and get an accurate, clear picture of that, slim to pretty much nil. I mean, think about if you want to go out and take a picture of a deer, a buck, a nice buck, and there's hundreds of thousands, millions of bucks out there, and you know that for a fact. Even then, and these aren't, I'm not saying they're dumb, but they're not primates like us or Sasquatch. They don't have that same capability. Yeah, they rely on their hearing for a lot of their sensing for predatory behavior out there, which they would sense you as a predator, of course. But yeah, your odds of getting a good, clear picture of one is pretty slim. So now think of something with a population of that, which is many, many times smaller. Point being, it's tough to get pictures of things, and eyewitness reports are not always the best thing to go off of. But when there's been consistent ones over the course of a long time frame, and they are consistently reporting the same thing, I think it's worth looking into and really considering to be legit to at least some degree. I mean, even if 1%, even if 0.1% of them are legit and the rest are fake, that 1% is something. That is something legit. That is something really out there, and I think that's worth believing in. All right, that was a bit of a tangent, but getting back into the Mothman, it's just, I don't believe it's a sandhill crane. There are a few holes in this theory to me. So for one, their eyes don't glow. And yeah, you can say, okay, they had the red rings around their eyes, but people were pretty explicitly seeing brightly glowing red eyes, glowing so bright it looked like there was a fire burning inside of this beast. So most animals that have eyes that quote-unquote glow, it's really the reflection of light. So they have something called a tapetum lucidum, which basically just improves night vision by reflecting light back through the retina so they can see better. So, I mean, a lot of animals have this, like dogs, cats, coyotes, alligators, deer. That's why you can, go down in the bayou or the swamp and then you shine a flashlight in the water and you'll see these shining gator eyes. It's pretty awesome. I definitely recommend doing that. It's so fun looking for gators out there. But yeah, sandhill cranes do not have the tapetum lucidum. They don't reflect light. Their eyes don't glow in any capacity. And they also definitely aren't capable of chasing after cars flying over 100 miles per hour, which is a pretty important part of that initial report. So I don't think it's a reasonable candidate. That's just me, though. And another common theory I've seen all over is that the Mothman is some kind of owl, like a snowy owl, a strigid owl. Usually people speculate it to be a Stygian owl based off of the wing size. But there are no owls with a 10-plus foot wingspan. That's just not a thing. They also are incredibly silent in their flight. They don't emit that phonograph-like or large mouse-like screeching sound. They are quiet flyers. And just the way that its wings are described and its pickup and its takeoff and the way it flies like a hang glider, it just doesn't seem like owl-like behavior from what I've studied. So I don't think it being an owl is a very plausible theory either. Their eyes do glow, somewhat. Don't glow a bright red necessarily, but they do have that reflective layer that reflects light into the retina, so it is something to think about. But overall, I don't think it's a realistic candidate for what the Mothman was. Another common theory I've seen is that it's a sort of government experiment or kind of a result of fallout mutation from residing in the TNT area. So some people think it was maybe laying dormant for a time and then was awoken by an influx of people hanging out in the area, because supposedly like it was a hangout spot for teens in the mid-60s. And I mean, this area was brutal. I mean, it was munitions storage for World War II. I mean, it was a full-on chemical waste storage. So some people believe the Mothman to be some unknown mutated creature, maybe the result of military experiments even. Like, I've thought maybe it was made to try and create some sort of creature capable of fighting our enemies during World War II or Vietnam. Think of like Jurassic World and them trying to breed dinosaurs for military use, but, you know, they have been up to some pretty interesting stuff over, well, especially the last 80 years or so. And, get into Area 51 and Roswell, and just, I look forward to talking about David Icke's stuff. I think he will really enjoy it. So, I mean, this theory is basically what they went for in Fallout 76, and that is just an irradiated moth, pretty much, that mutated over time. And I haven't been able to find a lot of legit info leading credence to this hypothesis, but I do think it's a fun one to think about, and that's what I'm all about. I like having fun. Well, now we can go to what John Keel thought, and reminder, this is the author of the Mothman prophecies, and he thought the creature might be an interdimensional entity who shows up around moments of disaster, kind of acting like a cosmic hall monitor for us. It being something truly otherworldly could explain some of the strange incidences, like the way it takes off, flies, and the speed it's capable of traveling at. Like if it's just something that doesn't really have to abide by our laws of physics and is able to tap into some other extra dimensional power, you know, fourth dimensional, fifth dimensional stuff. Maybe even sixth dimension. I don't know. It's possible though, of course. And a lot of people think that the Mothman is tied to tragedy worldwide, really. I mean, there were rumors of winged creatures being spotted right before the Chernobyl meltdown, for one, before certain earthquakes and tsunamis, and even before 9/11. So I'm not saying he was responsible for 9/11, but might have warned us or something related to Tower 7 maybe. Definitely don't look up Tower 7 9/11. You won't find any incredibly suspicious information about a tower just collapsing on its own. But no, don't do that. So technically, most of these claims are unverified regarding the Mothman being a paranormal entity. But it is pretty fascinating to think about a supernatural omen taking the form of a winged, flying Mothman humanoid creature with gray skin and wings. So it's pretty cool. And then there is, of course, the distinct possibility of it simply just being like a true straight-up cryptid, just an unknown, unidentified, undiscovered species, maybe of really large owl, maybe of, you know, just some bird that we just have never seen before, and there were only a couple of them, or maybe it was some kind of relic population. It's totally possible. I mean, think of if deep sea creatures exist out there that look like just an amalgamation of pure nightmares and teeth. Is it really that far out of the realm of possibility that there's a flying humanoid in the Appalachians? I've talked about it briefly before, but the Appalachian Mountains are quite literally over 480 million years old. And some of the rocks at the core of the mountains are they're up to 1.2 billion years old, is what I've read. Trees are about 350 million years old. They're literally older than the trees. That's what John Denver was singing about in his song in Country Roads. It's wild. I think it's pretty reasonable to think that there's a lot of stuff in those mountains in particular and the forest surrounding them that we just cannot even comprehend. Think of those cave systems over 1 billion years old. I mean, think about the descent. Think about those crawlers down there. I think it's pretty reasonable. So, all right, let's fast forward to the present day. We're in 2025 again, and Mothman, well, he's been a celebrity at Point Pleasant for decades. Every year during the third weekend in September, the town of Point Pleasant holds a Mothman festival commemorating the legend, and they lean really hard into it. I mean, it's a whole thing. People come from all over the country, all over the world for it. I mean, there's a museum there. There's even a Mothman statue. It's pretty sick. You should recommend you Google Mothman statue, because he's shredded. He's jacked. And he has an 8-pack, which I think is a pretty awesome way of looking at cryptids. I mean, Bigfoot's always depicted as being kind of fat and hairy and all that, so I think having a jacked, flying, 8-pack, ripped cryptid it's a good addition, in my mind. So, another interesting kind of modern thing is that between 2017 and 2023, there were a couple of reports out of Chicago, mainly around the O'Hare airport, of a winged humanoid, with some people saying it was Mothman. And there's some pictures out there, but they look pretty sketchy. They're either just a bird or Photoshop, in my opinion. It's hard to fully verify that, but that's just the vibe I get from that. And I wasn't really able to find much other evidence corroborating these claims, but I figured I'd mention it. You might want to dive into that a little bit yourself. So, I mean, what do I think about all this? Like, really, Mothman is one of those legends that just kind of sticks with you once you learn about it. It's not just like a, 8-foot tall monkey man running around in the woods. It's a whole mystery aspect to it. It's old school folklore. And then there's a horrible tragedy. And it just all kind of mixes together into this weird melting pot of stuff. Maybe Mothman was a warning, or a protector of the people on the bridge or in the town, or maybe he was a bad guy. Maybe he was a perpetrator of the tragedy. I don't want to disparage the man's name, but it's possible. We haven't really heard much from the man himself, so I think when looking at it from a completely logical point of view, the traits described by witnesses, they don't describe a bird. And we don't have anything else in this country that flies like a bird. And I mean, with that in mind, we're basically left with it being a completely undiscovered flying humanoid creature that lives in West Virginia, or it's a paranormal creature, just not of this world. There is, of course, also the possibility of it being a hoax, orchestrated by some of the locals. And there's this guy, Gray Barker, and he may have worked together with some other people to try and smooth out these details to come up with this cohesive creature. And he was this UFOologist. I'll probably talk about him at some point, but you should just Google Gray Barker. He's a neat guy. And it's even noted in Keel's book that he was kind of pondering Barker's general tendency to hoax, and he thought it was curious, just the fact that he was present on the ground during all of these Point Pleasant incidents. So that's just something to think about. Well, either way, I'd be pretty wary of driving around the TNT area at night, even nowadays. Sounds like a pretty sketchy area to be, regardless of there being flying humanoids that are precognizant of bridge collapses. You'd be dealing with chemical leakage and maybe just straight up TNT. I don't know. Well, this has been episode 2 of Radio Merdog. If you enjoyed this, please feel free to leave a review, share it with a friend who's into these sort of fringe things that I love that are just out of this world, and let me know what monsters or mysteries you would want me to cover next. I am super down for suggestions, and as always, this has been the Merdog, and I'm out. Peace.